Okay. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. My name is Sarah Al-Alim, and we are here with our beloved sister Amina for our series on understanding the nature of trauma, finding inspiration, support, and resources as we learn to gently heal. We are truly gifted, and I am super grateful to have Amina with us, who generously accepted our request to share this healing series as a continuation of our October series that we did. Please check it out on YouTube if you haven't done so already. Healing through istighfar. And this is a very beautiful way to continue the momentum into our deep healing. So Sister Amina has been a practitioner and teacher in holistic wellness for over 30 years, mashallah. She brings a background rich in the tradition of Sufism and a heart that desires to serve. The sessions will be recorded later on the Receiving Noor YouTube channel, which you can sign up on receivingnoor.org if you're not already on our listserv, where you'll receive reminders and events and other resources. Just to remind everyone, because these sessions are done by a healer, everyone that's heard Amina so far, I can attest that her voice is a healing voice. So please remember to, as Amina would say, be present in your body, feel yourself in your body the way you would in your home, and be present. So for optimal sound quality, and if so, feel free to use headphones if the sound is in and out. Inshallah, today is going to be an exciting session because we have plenty of fun activities to do together, which we can, inshallah, carry on into our daily lives as homework. And before we continue, I just wanted to give a special shout out to Isra, because I know that today is a special day where she was born. And I'm just very grateful for her and Yamina, for Dr. Yamina, for always setting us up with wonderful ideas, and Maha, that bring these beloved gatherings into fruition, which I really benefit from, alhamdulillah. So everyone, please say a prayer, inshallah, for Maha, Isra, and Yamina, Dr. Yamina, for always bringing us together. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah.
بارك الله فيهم وفيكم آمين يا رب العالمين.
Thank you, Sarah. I have a question for Sister Amina. Do you have a preference on whether we keep our cameras on or off?
Do I have a preference?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's, well, interesting you should ask, because I notice when cameras are on, I get feedback from people's faces. And so I find that very helpful. It's a way for me to feel, it's a way to co-regulate, and it's a way to feel connected. And yet I want to honor people's need to have the cameras off. But I think that it's much more helpful, and I also believe it can create a greater coherence between all of us when we see faces, and people might be more likely to speak up and to ask questions. And yeah, so that's fine with me. I think that would be great. So, all right, I am happy to be here. And alhamdulillah, another day. So in our first 3 classes, in the very first class, we were stepping into water, but I think with a toe or a foot. I felt like we moved lightly into our class. And I just wanted to do a mini review. In the first class, we talked about the unloved parts of ourself that sometimes arise from the unconscious mind into the conscious mind. And I know for me, when that was happening, it was frightening to perhaps be in prayer or taking a walk or sitting, and all of a sudden have one of those edgy thoughts come up, a thought that might be a little bit mean towards someone, or maybe some grief or sadness. And what I've learned is that everything is an ayah from Allah. And I've also learned, particularly from something we're going to study tonight, which will be a little bit lighter, it's a resource for trauma, is not to judge the thoughts. So if I have a little meanness, a little tiredness, maybe happiness, maybe some playfulness that comes up, we read in Rumi's poem that they are all welcome guests in this guest house that we live in, our clay vessel, our body. And one of the ways we can work with these pieces that come up from the unconscious mind, where we're not aware of them, into the conscious mind, when conscious mind is like going from darkness into the light, is these pieces want to be seen and acknowledged. So we have an opportunity, as dubious, as doubtful as it might seem, to welcome these thoughts I'd rather run away from. But I find something different happens when I can befriend those parts of myself. They're parts that are just seeking recognition and healing. And as we find out tonight, we're going to see that they're also expressing needs. So that was our first class. In the second and third class, we began to learn about the autonomic nervous system. And I mentioned that autonomic is like automatic. That's how I remember the name, or what it does, is it functions below or beneath the awareness of the conscious mind. And we talked about three parts of the autonomic nervous system. And one is the sympathetic nervous system. And the way I would remember that is say, I really have sympathy for somebody who's in that nervous system all the time, because its nickname is fight, flight, or freeze. Now, if we remember that everything that's made by Allah is made for a purpose, and this nervous system is made to check out safety. Is it safe where I am here? New environment. How does that person feel? We're always looking for safety in our lives, or is it dangerous? And of course, if we take ourselves back generations, many of us, I would say all of us, came from some kind of tribal people that really had to have their eyes open and be aware of what was happening in the environment. And so our environment doesn't have tigers. And well, if you live in the hills of Virginia, you might run into some bear and bobcat and maybe a cougar. I had an experience with a cougar in Florida once that I'll never forget, a baraka from that animal. But we have different kinds of things that we get anxious about, that when we're anxious, we're in fight or flight. And particularly at this time on the planet, am I going to stay well? Will my children or grandchildren be well? Do I have enough money for food? Will I be warm this winter? And I think of the Mesquite and the people, the refugees, the people seeking refuge, not immigrants, people seeking refuge in camps. Will they be warm? Will they have enough food? So when we worry and we wonder, is my marriage going to work out? People have, will I be safe? Many, many, many concerns that become worries. And when we're in this nervous system, that's when we might be and have panic attacks, be overwhelmed, feel anxious, chaotic. And if these feelings are unable to express themselves in some way, they get frozen in the nervous system. They get locked in. And that's when people, so for example, who have post-traumatic stress, sometimes people have memories that thread back to early childhood. And these things, when not expressed, when they haven't had an opportunity to heal, can create disease in the body. God knows best, but it can, let's just say it can have an effect on the body. And so that's the sympathetic nervous system. And if we're in that state for a long period of time or short period, I don't want to judge how much a person can work with, but a person might collapse into their dorsal nervous system. And some of the hallmarks of that nervous system is when we feel isolated, immobilized, we can't cope, hopeless, helpless, I'm no good, those feelings depressed. We have no more energy. And so people sometimes cycle back and forth. They feel a little better, and then all of a sudden they're in the sympathetic nervous system. And that's when people often have some form of addiction, right? So bouncing into dorsal because they don't know how to find sacred ground in their being. Okay, and that's the third. So this is the good news. We talk about sympathetic and dorsal, it becomes very heavy, deep water. So the good news is that we also have a younger nervous system, and only mammals can have this nervous system, right? It's called the ventral vagal nervous system. And I refer to it as holy ground and a sanctuary. And when we're in the ventral vagal, this is when we feel settled in our body, when we're safe, at peace, where I see our sister Isra right there. I can look right in her eyes and I'm getting, there's a smile back. I'm feeling that connection and that lightens my heart. And we talked about the way infants learn this is in their mother's womb. You know, Allah knew us even before we were in our mother's womb. We carry that DNA in our being. We have those planes of light, yes? And so in our mother's womb, if mom was a happy mom, I don't know if anybody's 100% happy, but that rocking or singing to the baby in the womb and later after the child is born, this is what Sarah and I were speaking about and sharing at the beginning, so before class began, this movement. And you can just even now bring your arms like you're holding a baby, bring them close to your body. Now we can bring in a little rocking. And sometimes I look down and I see that little, might be my baby self. And I want a little feedback. How does it feel to do that? How does that feel just to hold, let's say, hold a part of yourself or someone you love? My daughter's 40, almost 40. How did she get to be there? But I can remember, I have that memory deep in my being. I can still hold her baby self.
Amina, does this work for brothers as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Not just the ladies here. So
No, this is universal. This is how we learn to, you know, the word everyone uses now is co-regulate. We're co-regulating. Your face is right here on big on the screen, and we're co-regulating. And that helps me to self-regulate. Okay. This is how we learned. But sometimes that gift, if we got it, most of us got a taste of it at least. If the gift is lost, we can, with support, inshallah, and the grace of God, find our way home again. And home is our clay vessel, our bodies, our sanctuary. You know, this is our temple where we pray, our mosque in a sense. So, all right.
When you say find our way home again, I find this so profound. Can you just, I think it's such an important concept we talked about in the first session. I think we maybe touched on it again in the second session and we practiced. But why, when we're co-regulated, do we find our way home again? And then why is that important?
Because if we can't rest in the ventral vagal nervous system, then we're in sympathetic or dorsal. So we need safe ground. And the more we know, well, it's like the more we educate the nervous system, the ventral, so there's a nerve called the vagus nerve in the body. that it's got to do with facial expressions, and it's partially responsible for digestion, and it helps to slow the heart rate down. The more that we can return to that safe ground, the refuge. So I used that word before. No, Allah's the only refuge, and we will find God. How do I want to say? There's. I'm babbling here now. If I start talking matters of the heart, sometimes I get excited, but we will find God in our heart, and the way to return to that heart is to be in the ventral vagal, which is to be home, inshallah, with Allah. To have that taste. We all have, sometimes we're lonely and sometimes we're longing. Sometimes we have longing. That's different from lonely. We have that longing for the beloved. And to be able to settle in the body and feel some peace. It's not my peace, it's the remembrance of God's peace. And we even started these series out saying that we all have a luminous being. That's the premise, that we are all beings. We come from, makes me want to cry, we come from planes of light. And we all have this memory somewhere in our being. And this work we do, the trauma veils us. The veils are a protection, but they're also a sort of hindrance. And there's a point where we say, I don't want to think that way anymore, or I'd like to work with and heal this peace, because we have that longing within us to be back really in the depth of the heart. Yeah. So anyway, I get excited. So what we're going to talk about tonight, let me make sure I finish that. So yeah, we're there. Did that help a little bit? Did that help, Sister Sarah? Was that helpful?
Yeah, it's just a beautiful reminder, I think, and it's a fundamental point that, we were reminded last week that we were talking a lot about theory, and today is how we kind of put the theory into practice. But so far, the need to be in that, what you're calling the ventral vagal, or this place that is at peace, that's not the fight or flight, and it's not this place that's super down. That's important, because what you're saying is that's where we will find God in our heart, and to return to our heart is this safe place. And that's what this series is all about. So I just wanted to make that clear, because it's not just about people that have suffered some sort of trauma, or and however people will define that, but truly we all have a need to return to our bodies, to this safe place, so that we can find that place of God. And that's the healing that all humans need, despite whether you identify yourself as having suffered trauma or not, although we have all had our traumatic experiences with this learning journey. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah, it makes me think of the ayah in Nur, that the light of God is like a parable.
Yes.
And, the lamp that's of, I would have to sit quiet with myself to try and say it in Arabic and remember it in English. But it's like the transparent lamp. It's our heart. This is our heart. And we're polishing the mirror of the heart, where that light, I think, this is my opinion, I think the light exists in every cell of our being, in every atom. But the heart is a place where we can touch into. We all need a grounding.
When you said we all have luminous being, is that what you meant? There's light?
Yes, I think that. Well, Allahu nuru as-samawati wal ard.
Yeah.
So.
And you mentioned, Amina, you mentioned the addiction, and I was wondering if you're going to talk a little more about it. Because that addiction is not only
it can manifest itself in emotional eating or, you know, all kinds of different activities. But actually, I was reading some years ago that it's actually, we can also become addicted to the very stress, to the very, how did you call it? The flight and fight and freeze.
Yes.
Being in that space,
Mhm.
we become so much addicted to it because whatever state we are in, there are some chemicals that the body would produce to adjust to that state of being.
Yeah.
And so those chemicals become like, actually like a drug. And subhanAllah, we become addicted to a state that we are not at ease or at peace with. And so, and also, how do we learn to heal from that addiction that we are not even aware of?
Yes, I'm asking.
Although there are signs, because, you know, people have some addictions in the world, and one very popular one is eating, for instance, overeating and things like that. Yeah.
I think there's two things that can happen is that sometimes people become numb. Something is frozen inside and they forget how to feel. It's a kind of, no, it doesn't matter. I used to say, I don't care a lot. And I had to retrain the puppy to say, I do care. I do care about me. It's not, oh, I'm okay. It doesn't matter. I don't care.
Mhm.
No, it's I do care. And so it's allowing the body. So we all, if in your classes and this work, it's really about learning how to feel what's happening in the body. My teachers in this work say the body never lies.
True.
My thought does this, but my body, if I can pause and listen, there's always a message. And the message might come as a feeling, as a sensation in the body. So sometimes that numbness, that frozenness, so it's having something healthy to wake us up again. And the fight or flight, people do become addicted to those hormones, that always being busy. Sometimes being, I had to look at this in myself quite recently, being busy. And coming back to it, what came to me was, well, I don't need to go in personal history. It kind of stretches back into, we get many patterns from our parents or grandparents or people around us. And sometimes busy is just staying busy so you don't have to look at something or even know that you have something to look at, right? So that's when a person might, and I, probably all of us know that, we call it, with a heroic smile, multitasking. But I'm not sure that much multitasking is always healthy. We have to find a balance, and it's not, balance isn't static. Balance has to flow with what's happening. That's the dance. We talked about that ideal of perfection last week. That's very static. God is perfect. We aspire, but we're in process. So how do we flow? And I think that there are many addictions. I learned that there's something, and I think the name for it is techno-apnea. And it's when people are on their phones or gaming all the time, they hold their breath, right? They're so here, they hold their breath, for they forget to breathe. I mean, eventually you'll have to take a breath of air, right? But they hold their breath more than we naturally would if we were engaged with people or walking or doing something. So people get addicted to binge watching something on TV. And I don't know, I actually binge watched Eunice Emery, more than once, but that's it. I decided that was good, so it's finding that balance in our being. And I have to say, once I saw Eunice, there's nothing worth watching on TV since then. So truly, but it's finding that balance. Where do we find balance? And like finely tuned, beautiful instruments, how do we keep ourselves in tune? And then there's the obvious things like people eating too much or not eating enough, or people, shop till you drop, or the different, it might be drugs, it might be something else. So what's taking us out of balance? And I think people get into addictions too because they're numb, and sometimes they desire to feel. They're either numbing themselves out more so they don't feel, or they have a desire to feel. So, yeah. But ultimately, if we bring it back to, so what is the answer? The answer is, what is it that brings us back to this knowing that there's a pathway into our being? You know, what's kept us outside of our body for so long? What makes it scary to be able to sit with us? So exploring what brings us back. What brings us back? Is there a safe place, a safe memory? And often when I'm with people or myself, I'll have them say, can you remember a person or an animal or a tree? We could do it as an exercise now. You want to do that? Little exercise. So we could all just think of something that brings you a sweet memory, a time, a person, a place, a celebration where you felt completely loved and safe. And just see if you can remember something dear to you, something that's dear. And then the next step would be, can you notice where you feel that in your body? So we can take our time with that one. Can you feel that feeling somewhere in your body? And notice what that might feel like. Is it warm or cold? Hot? Is it soft? Tender? Maybe it feels the opposite. Maybe there's a little hardness or toughness there. So we're noticing without judging. Where do we feel this sweetness in the body? Right? And then notice as we sit here, always noticing without judgment, noticing with kindness. Is that feelings just staying there? Is it shifting? Sometimes you'll get a feeling that it's melting. And in that melting, there's a spreading, a gentle spreading in the system. Notice how that memory feels, and we can even have some, gratitude, appreciation for that gift at that time or that moment in our life. And then when it feels right to you, you can very gently open your eyes. And I like my eyes to be soft and looking down. And then I can, when I'm ready, to greet the beautiful faces here that I see and the beautiful names. Yeah. So I'm wondering, you can stay quiet and paused with this, but I'm wondering if there's something, a sensation or a feeling that somebody might like to share. What was your experience with this?
I remember when when my son left for boarding school and he came back and he just held me so tightly at the airport. It's
Oh,
very tender, just a very tender feeling, and very, very sad too, because it made me cry,
yeah.
It was just, yeah. He had been away for about 4 months, and that was a long time. We had never been away that long. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So those are the pictures and the goodness we feel. And so if we're doing a little bit of science, we would say that what we're doing is we're touching into that ventral vagal nervous system, and we're saying hello to it. We're allowing it to experience something that's tender, there's love, it's a feeling. And that's informing that nervous system. And now we've created a pathway. It was probably there. But how nice to dip into that place and remember goodness. And then ultimately the giver of goodness. And to feel that in our body, that's when it becomes real. Not to think it in our body. We have the thought of what we wanted to remember. But when we feel it, there's a different texture and quality.
I have a question here. So, without the science, often in our past retreats, especially with the women retreats, I always wanted to use this exercise to show first, as you said, it needs to be anchored in the body so that it's experienced and tasted and savored. And the second is that we all always have access to that part.
Yes.
And often in every retreat, there would be people who say, I have no such a memory. So I would say, just imagine something that would make you. And some people would say, I can't imagine. I say, imagine it, make it up. It's easy to, you can make it up. Some people would make it up, but some people won't.
Yeah. Well, what we're going to explore tonight is feelings and needs. And so that might be a good segue, because I thought that I would share something called compassionate communication. And a man by the name of Marshall Rosenberg, who since passed away, developed this work. And it's about feelings and needs. And when you work with people that can't find something, so I would stay with that feeling, because we're not judging grief or lonely or any of those things as bad feelings. Those feelings will always take us to a need. And so perhaps the person that can't feel something, underneath that might be a need for connection, might be a need for love, might be a need to be seen and heard. If they can't feel, they probably aren't seen and heard a lot in their lives, or weren't at one time. And it was one of those thoughts that crystallized, became a belief. The belief, a habit, the personality, and personality destiny. We talked about that in an earlier class. You see that? So that's perfect for this work. And it originally, with Marshall Rosenberg, it was called Nonviolent Communication, the Language of Compassion. And I like just saying compassionate communication and just giving him credit, because he really created a beautiful body of work. And I have some quotes here with asterisks and forgot to put down who they came from. They're all from Jack Kornfield, who's a beautiful teacher in mindful meditation. And he says, compassion is our deepest nature. It arises from our interconnection with all things, not some things, all things. just like you were sharing in your talk the other night, Dr. Yamina. Everything. We have interconnection with all of life. And so how I got into studying this was, maybe 15 or more years ago. I went to visit a friend and her husband, and we had weekly gatherings at her home. And at that time, I didn't know that her boss, who had 11 employees, was off in California studying with Marshall Rosenberg. And then he would come back and teach what he learned to his employees. And so I was in her house, and she asked me how I was doing. And I don't remember what I was going through at that time, but I probably had an answer. Oh, I'm okay. Or I don't know. I can't stand this. That kind of conversation. And she simply said to me, are you feeling? And she named what she imagined I was feeling, because you need. And it stopped me in my tracks, because it had probably been forever when somebody had listened and connected with my heart in a way that didn't judge or fix or tell a story. There's a whole list I'll have in our notes next week. She simply listened, went to that feelings and needs list that was inside of her, and feeling around the edges, perhaps, of what I was saying. Are you feeling because you need? And I remember standing there wanting to cry, but I felt too embarrassed to, because my heart was that deeply touched. So we're going to play with some of this tonight. We're not going to be in the deep water of, I don't think Vagal, the Vagal work is too deep, but sometimes that dorsal and sympathetic can be deep. So we're going to find a tool. And the reason I love this is because of the experience I had when she spoke to me, but also because one of the things we do as human beings is communicate. And we communicate with body language, whatever we do, right? And facial expressions. That's why I'm having wonderful feedback from beautiful faces here. And I know all the other beautiful faces are there, and that's good too. But we communicate, and we also communicate with our thoughts. Sometimes I have thoughts about people or situations or things. And sometimes they're self-talk, how I talk to myself. Ta-da. So compassionate communication teaches us how to communicate with compassion and speak with honesty. For me, it helps to develop the adab of the heart. And I probably don't say that wonderful Arabic word right. And I know sometimes it's translated as manners, but for me, it also has that connotation of a noble spirit. So consider, is it possible that everything, so I'm not saying this is truth, I'm just asking you, what do you think? Is it possible that everything a human does is based on an attempt to have their needs met? So I'll give some examples. When you eat, is it to be nourished, for enjoyment, to celebrate? How about sleeping? Rest, comfort? Yelling. Maybe it's a child in a playground having fun, and they're just expressing themselves with all that spontaneity and exuberance that children have. Or maybe someone needing to be heard, right? How about sharing? Compassion, connection? So do you want to share any ideas around that? Do you think it's possible? Or just hold that. Is that a possibility that everything we do? What was that?
I was just going to say that truly, like, the oneness of God is so profound, because in the October healing series with Dr. Yamina, we talked about the importance to forgive, conscious forgiveness of yourself and others. And currently, for those who are not aware, we're doing a healing prescription for 3 months, which has to do with meditation and constantly checking into your state of being. Again, everyone, if you need information on that, feel free to text us in the chat. But this question now, consider, is it possible that everything a human does is based on an attempt to have their needs met? To me, it just married the concept that Dr. Yamina was saying in October, because the heart softens. Well, my heart, let me speak to myself. My heart softened with that thought.
Yeah. So we have an exercise. I'll say one more thing, then we have an activity. And I said what we've all said all along, that this is sort of the container for all that our lives, is that all feelings are ayat, signs from Allah, and that each ayah guides us toward our needs, expressed in the 99 names most beautiful. Inshallah, subhanallah. Our feelings are a guide to our need or our needs. Instead of expressing our feelings by saying, you make me feel cranky because I need you to pick up your dishes, consider saying, oh, I feel upset because I really value some cleanliness in the family room. I really need some support. Do you see the difference? There's it's subtle, it's like a little shift in a perspective on how we can view, how am I connecting with my heart? Well, I feel becomes, I'm going to say, a choice. I made a choice to feel this way. I can't blame my feelings on somebody else. I choose to. And it's okay if I feel cranky. That's telling me what's not working, what's my need. And the need isn't, I need you to pick everything up. That may come as a request later, which we'll explore, inshallah, next week. So just going to the request. I need some order in the house. And I can even use my big cranky voice. I need some order. I'm not shaming, blaming, punishing, judging the other person. I'm just letting them know, right? This is how I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And then it's a shift from the ego.
Yes.
Because it's acknowledging our needs. And we know, like in the Islamic tradition, all we have is our needs. That's why they're the key to communicating, the key to connecting to everything else, to the world, and the key to connecting and to tasting the beautiful names of God and to getting to know God. But for some reason, because when we think needs, people think weakness, or needs means something you want to take care of, so that it's something it doesn't have a good connotation.
So there's a couple pieces. You're absolutely right that sometimes we're told women, real men don't have feelings, and women they're so emotional, right? Or women are needy and real men don't have needs. And that's a kind of cultural, probably from all cultures, that people don't know how to acknowledge. When we talk about feelings, it's the heart. It's that felt sense in the body leads to the heart. So, and this way, the old model, and I'll put that in next week's notes, is that people often use shame, blame, guilt, judgment, and punishment to get their needs met. And they'll use it in their language. If you don't pick up your toys now, you can't play with your friends this weekend. And we'll explore, and I know, ow, I wish I'd known this when I was a parent. But And truly, I mean that quite sincerely. I wish I knew what I know now. We'll talk about making repair later with people that I may have stepped on my daughter's toes more than once for sure. But so this is moving, like you said, Sister Yamina, from the ego, from having to use shame, blame, guilt to get a need met, because we haven't been taught that it's okay to say, I feel because I need. So I have something, this is a little activity. And I'm really respecting if people didn't have time to look at their notes or couldn't print them out or, do all those things that it takes to get a copy. But if you have pencil and paper, if you don't, please take a moment and get it. If you can, please, please. And I'm wishing I could see people jumping up from their chairs. Who's leaving, or can I keep going? No matter. On this handout, this is allegedly a letter T. I didn't know how to make a big T on the computer where it would fill up the page. So it's a little bit like smartphones are only as smart as the person using it. So, so this is a T, and I want
Easier to use columns.
What's that?
On the computer, it's easier to use columns.
Okay, thank you. Yay, thank you. I will try that. So I have a letter T here, and we need a space. So if you've just got paper and pencil or pen, just draw it in, but you want to leave space at the top. And on the left arm of the T, put feelings, or just above it. And over the right arm of the T, put needs. Okay, are you there? Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, what you're going to write up here is something that you saw or heard. And it's just that, there's no backstory. So when I saw all the dishes on the floor, when I saw that man pulling that dog, when I saw two people kissing each other in the middle of Walmart, just something you witnessed, but we really wanted something that had stimulated you, not a big trauma, not a big one. We'll just look at something smaller here. Some kind of stimulation for you. Maybe somebody said something that seemed unkind. Okay. So up here is just pure awareness, pure witnessing when I saw or when I heard. Okay. And please tell me if I am going too fast, because this is actually something that we need to pause and go through it slowly. So here, when I heard that or I saw that, I felt. And just in this column, see if you can come up with some feelings. In that moment when you saw or heard something that happened, I felt.
You can, is disappointment a feeling?
Say that again.
Is disappointment a feeling?
Disappointed, yes, I felt disappointed. I'm going to check on my list here. I think so. Well, we're going to let it be here. We can say disappointed. They have disheartened, so that's not far from disappointed. There's a lot of lists there. And of course, in this one, it's because I needed, where are my feelings and needs? Because I needed. Okay. I felt because I needed.
Assalamu alaikum. Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, of
So
course.
this T chart, on one side, we need to put down feelings about anything, like just like a keyword.
Well, what it is it's when I saw or heard this, and it's going to be something that had a little, made you feel a little anxious or upset, not something big. And it's just when I saw or heard, no backstory, I felt. When I saw or heard this, I felt because I needed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, and you can pause with that. You know, I felt, and you can allow yourself to go slowly through this exercise. Does it feel complete? You can look through the list of feelings and needs again, or just listen to your own heart. I felt because I needed. Right? You can have 10 feelings, 20 feelings. The same with needs. Pause and notice how you feel and what was needed. Does that feel complete? Do we need to go slower? Okay, now we're going to turn this paper over. Okay, I'm pretending I turned it over. We're going to make the same T on the back with the word feelings above the left arm of the T and needs above the right arm. Okay. And at the top, we're going to write in the same thing. Whatever it was on the other side, when I saw or when I heard, just the observation. Okay. So when I saw, when I heard, I felt, and don't fill in the feelings and needs.
Amina, are we now moving to a second situation?
No, this is the same one up here. I'll tell you what comes next. So we flip the paper over and we wrote the same words up here. But this time what we're going to write in under the feelings is when the person said this, what do you think they were feeling? Thank you for asking. Thank you. And what do you think they were needing? So go through this very slowly. When that person maybe was yelling at me or got mad or was crying, whatever the story was, said something. What do you think they were feeling and what do you think they were needing? And really in this process, we go slowly, we pause doing it so that we can see if we connect. On the first sheet, it was with our feelings and needs. On this side, am I able to connect with what I imagine the feelings and needs might have been for that person? It's really wanting to connect with their being. Yeah. We want to connect with their being. And notice when that feels complete. And you may want to look at the list again if you have the list there, or just touch inside and say, and ask yourself, ask your body, does this feel complete? Does it feel complete? And so I would ask you, if it feels like time to share, what did it feel like to connect with your feelings in a different way? And to connect with might have been the feelings and needs of that person.
I'll start just because mine, I started with something easy to do and not like deeper stuff. But lately I've been waking up super early, like 5:30 a.m. with a small human that's full of a list of needs. I mean, the needs are just a lot. It's like now that he speaks, it's just a lot. Um, a specific song or a specific book with light and the this, and I'm just like, whoa, that's just way too much. And I find myself getting so filled with anger and frustration that I'm yelling. And the yelling actually ends up making everyone else in a bad mood. But I'm just so flustered at that time. And so initially I put my feelings as angry, frustrated, tired, because I need more rest for my body to be relaxed. But as soon as you asked the question from the other side, I just felt like they were, then he's feeling uncomfortable. I know he's teething, uneasy, and I just felt so bad. Not bad, but I just felt so compassionate and more understanding.
That's the piece. If we can understand, so I know I'm repeating myself, that everything we do is in order to meet a need, but it's how we do that, that makes the difference. And compassion, of all the 99 names following Bismillah Rahman Rahim, it wasn't the other 97 qualities, right? It was Rahman Rahim, mercy and compassion, or compassion and compassionating. But those qualities, awakening the seed, right, of those qualities in our heart. And now this is how we connect with ourselves and how we can learn to connect with others. Thank you for sharing. That's very profound. That's
Truly. Please, others, feel free to share so that we can be on this healing journey together.
Okay, I'm going to go if no one else has something to share. So what my situation is, I had a friend last Sunday was going to come help me with just some stuff, putting away some of the gardening stuff for about an hour. And this friend just kind of strung me along all day. And then at about 4, a little after 4, she texts me saying, "I'm tired, I won't be able to come." So the feelings that I experienced, and I still, as I recall this, I'm experiencing these, are anger, outrage, disappointment, sadness, and then what my need is I needed help. I really needed help. And right now I am I've got a lot going on, so I could really use an extra set of hands to help me with what I was trying to get done.
Yeah, you needed support.
Yes.
And I'm guessing you needed some communication. Earlier in the day, you needed some, some direct communication.
Well, all day,
Marriage.
well, she kept saying is I'll be there, and I told her is okay. This is what I'm preparing for lunch. Let me know if there's something else you'd like to eat. And she responded an hour or so later saying, "Oh, I'll come after lunch." So then I told her is okay. Then I'll just have some snacks and tea ready for us. And she didn't respond to that. And then 4 hours pass. And then I get a text saying, "Oh, I'm tired. I won't be able to make it. Maybe next weekend." And so my need was definitely support. I mean, I needed one, I needed the help. Um, some of the pots and things I was lifting were a little bit heavy, so I could use an extra set of hands. And And so, okay, so my needs were I needed the help, I needed support. And so now I'm flipping over to the other person. Her feelings, I think. So what she told me was a few minutes before she was scheduled to arrive is she had to run to the grocery store. Um so I think for her it was probably that she just didn't plan her day out well or weekend well. And it's like, oh, you know what? I need to run to the grocery store. So I'm not sure. I'm
So,
struggling. I'm struggling trying to be in the other person's shoes because I'm still upset.
yeah, so I want to offer you some empathy. And, I could say, yeah, I'm really hearing that you were frustrated and angry because you needed some support.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering, and I'm understanding that. And I'm wondering, maybe if she was feeling, it sounds like you had a need for clear communication, because I'm hearing you use words like she strung me along. So that's a judgment, but I don't want to get into the nitty gritty of this. This is like a little smorgasbord where we get to sample a little bit of this compassionate communication. So
Okay.
we don't know that she may not have been stringing you along. It might have been that she didn't have the tools to know how to say, I really need some space, and I have a need to um, be at home today, or I have a need to uh, for some independence. And I know I said I would be there, but today I do something else. And so I'm thinking that there was probably a need for her to know how to communicate her feelings and needs in a different way. There was this sense that she probably had this feeling in her body and her mind for a number of hours and just didn't know how to communicate that. So, and she just had a need for space or independence, or I'm not sure, not sure. So, thank you. And somebody saying, yeah, now when I have your message, Isra. And so, what would you like? Do you want to share something around this? What you're feeling right now?
I'm okay now, but when she was telling, what bothered me most was that she didn't say directly in the morning, and the whole day you're waiting for someone, and preparing lunch, preparing tea. She
Yeah.
could have done some work, but she's trying to honor her coming. So I was
Exactly.
upset that she never clarified. So she kind of sort of, maybe Nahar would have asked somebody else to help, or had done something else that day and rescheduled for another day. But she didn't say directly and kept her waiting, and that made me upset.
I thought I needed help is not an emotion. So
Right.
there is something underneath. I would have felt, for instance, betrayed, for instance, because someone, promised something and then doesn't, or something. But like I'm just, I thought, okay, help, yes, true. That's a fact, but it's not an emotion. It's not a feeling.
Well,
And
no,
maybe
it's a need. It's a need. Help is
Yeah,
the
I
need.
think that's where I was. saying is, my need
Yeah.
was I needed help with this task. And to make to add a little bit more clarity is I didn't even ask this particular individual for help. I just stated to them is, listen, guys, I'm going through a tough time. I've got a lot going on my plate. And she offered to help. And so when she offered, I was delighted. But then when it didn't come through, I was certainly disappointed, angry, frustrated. Yeah.
And so what I can say is that if I plan to do this week and next week and possibly the last week, and if we could extend it more, we would really be working on how do we respond, how do we share our feelings with people. So speaking to this person, I really felt frustrated because I spent all day preparing, and I just want to let you know how I'm feeling. I really needed some help that day. And so there is a way to do this. And also, I think there was a red flag earlier, the fact that she kept calling, and perhaps a need to touch in and say, are you really willing to come today? It's important for me to know that. So I just need clarity around that. So, because again, if we could all speak this way, we'd all be clear and everything would be fine. And that's why this work is needed in the world. Mentioned, I've got on your resource sheet. I'm waiting for one more call and then I'll hand that out, send that off in the mail. There's actually a year-long course that teaches this in 20 countries and in 14 languages, including Arabic and Turkish, that teach this work. We need this in the world. We hear how politicians communicate. Yeah, we need this a lot. But I'm sorry that happened to you, and I can understand that frustration and that need for clarity from her earlier in the day.
So, like Amina, one of the things that I find that is culturally based, at least in the Egyptian culture, Meher, I don't know, which is like the inability to ask someone for like clarity. Are you coming to my home or not? Like, it sounds like in my culture, it's rude. Like, you need to prepare, like, and you don't ask. Even when people come, I cannot ask them how long are they going to stay. Like,
Yeah.
it's in my culture, it's rude. Like, you just assume they're going to stay forever. So, and they decide when they want to leave. So again, I think it's a lot of cultural baggage that we hold in, and what Amina is offering here is an acceptable cultural way, because like it's with a language of compassion. So it is like, it, like, I did not have these words when I was your age, Meher. I'm still learning them at this age, which is like the words of like, I need clarity. Like, I would like, I when you were speaking, I would say I would exactly be doing what you're doing. Like, my question is all focused on the guest and welcoming the guest. It's not focusing on that I have a need, like, and so now what Amina is offering to all of us is to realize our feeling and the need, and to make that need clear, like, in a compassionate way. So like, I don't know, like, I don't have the words because I have not practiced that, but like, um I would, to ask for clarity, like, if you are, do you have a time that you'll be committing to come? I think the questions that we're asking are more on like, how can I host you, and we're not asking the question that we need, when are you coming exactly? And for me, that I thought it was culturally inappropriate, rude to ask this question. But
You're absolutely right, Dr. Alia. It's I had the same thought when she said she wasn't going to be here for lunch. I was like, oh, I'll just have some tea for her, and it occurred to me, but it's like I did feel like it was rude for me to ask that. And here's somebody that's doing me a favor. How could I possibly ask them this question? That's where I was coming from. So I didn't. And
so Yeah. So now we're learning. It's a good age to learn this. Meher.
And the age is a good age. Imagine if they, and I'm quite serious, imagine if they taught this in school. Now, if we're able to sometime, or I also teach this in Charlottesville and Zoom, but even through Receiving Nur to make this longer sometime, inshallah, there are ways to work with anger. This is not about suppressing anger. And there are ways to give full vent to that anger, but not in that person's face. So we work on the anger first, and then express something to the person. And there are ways to set healthy boundaries. Nobody should ever feel unsafe. And I will try and do that next week because it ties into some questions that someone had when they signed up for the course. So this isn't just a pat formula that you do these, there's like 4 pieces initially. Oh, do this and everything will be fine. Life isn't like that. I wish it, well, I'm glad it isn't, because it would actually be quite dull. So, but it's a formula, and then we grow, and there's the finer tuning to the things that we're doing.
So could the takeaway, Amina, what would your takeaway advice be when we have a feeling like, to express it in words of needs to the other? What would, like, if you would summarize, this activity into, this would be my advice when you have a feeling and go to your need, how to communicate it? How would you word that for us?
I feel because I need. And sometimes as you are making this more street friendly, so it doesn't sound so much like therapy, you can just say, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, instead of I'm feeling because I'm needing. You can say, I'm angry, I feel upset, or I value agreements honored. I value agreements honored. Right?
And before
you can say it with that kind of voice. It doesn't have to be. Someone told me once, this is a friend of mine refers to this as therapy with the tool. And I used to see someone who's very well versed and spent years studying this. And she said, when you talk to your daughter with that nice, soft, spiritual voice you have, she has nothing to push against. She needs to be met with her energy. So instead of saying, oh dear, it sounds like you're really feeling angry, that doesn't work for her. So I have to develop a big voice and say, I hear you're angry. I get it. I'd be angry too. That's not how I normally speak. So there's a lot of little nuances with this, so we can learn how to meet people and meet ourselves. Yeah. There is a place for getting angry, and I would love to, I don't know that we'll have time, but I would love to share that, because like I said, I'll give you an example. Marshall Rosenberg was, if I remember the story right, was trying to bring this into a school system. And there was someone on the board who was part of the John Birch Society, which would be like a very, very, very conservative right wing, and this is many years ago, who thought of Rosenberg as a Jew, and this is being kind of far left hippie stuff, compassionate communication, right? And he was very unkind in news articles toward Dr. Rosenberg. And Dr. Rosenberg had to go to a meeting, and this man would be present. The night before that meeting, he met with his best people, and he was allowed to vent his anger. And eventually, once you vent that anger, you have a little more balance to put it into feelings and needs, but not when you're really flipping out, So the next day he's at the building and he gets in the elevator to go to this meeting, and who's in the elevator but this man, right? And the man says something to him, but because Marshall had worked through his anger, he was able to meet him with compassionate communication. And by the end of the meeting, that man was supporting Marshall. Do you see that? Do you see the difference? So instead of being defensive, to able to say, well, I hear you're really concerned about money being spent or whatever the man's concerns were, or about this misguiding people. And instead of trying to convince the man about what he was doing, he was really able to lean in and feel what the man's feelings were and what his needs might have been. And he tells a number of stories like that. So, but that takes someone well-versed in, not well-versed, but being just present of mind and heart to be able to do that.
Are we going to do this exercise with Meher's situation where she tries to identify the feelings of the friend who stood her up?
Yeah, so that would be good to continue on with that and say, what do you think that person was feeling and what was the need that they might have had? Yes, Dr. Yumi.
Yeah, I've been feeling like, to me, it feels like in this situation, two things are going on at the same time. There is the relationship we have and the communication with the other. And that's where we are learning to express our feelings with our needs, being aware of our needs. But there is also the relationship we have with ourselves. Like, I'm trying to put myself in this situation. Yes, there is a need for support. There is a need for help. That's why the whole thing is going on. But being stood up could bring, for instance, in me, not only the anger of being stood up, but deep down, I was trying to feel, what would I feel? Maybe not being respected, not being valued, which is something that I need to work on, me with me, because I see the whatever is happening, as you said in the beginning, is an ayah. So the anger is an ayah, not only, and so this ayah is not only to teach me how to communicate with others, but also it's an ayah that's going to primarily, the goal of the ayah is to grow myself as an individual, as a human being in the presence of God in my spiritual journey. And so, yeah.
And I want to wonder if this woman maybe was feeling awkward, embarrassed.
That's
you see
those
that
are definitely possibilities. Yes.
Yes, embarrassed because for whatever her need was.
I'm curious what Meher wrote. I'm curious what Meher wrote as the friend's needs and feelings.
I wrote down that, because this was after the long holiday weekend, so her need was to kind of get her stuff done before the start of the new week. And that was her need. And then the other thing is that her need may have been for some alone time if she had kind of spent the entire Thanksgiving weekend with other people and needed just some quiet time. So that's what I put down as her needs.
What about the feelings?
Her feelings, this is where I did struggle with the feelings. I did not put anything down for the feelings.
So I would say maybe awkward, embarrassed. She didn't know how to bow out gracefully. She did what she,
I would like to share what I think. The woman, I think the friend feels tired or felt tired. That's what was going on. I get this a lot. I organize events and people, sort of back out at the last minute, and it does offend me, and I find it irresponsible. And of course, those people will never be invited by me again. in an event, because I know exactly how serious or not serious they are. But I also know that they may feel tired, they may feel unprepared, and also the seriousness of the situation may have not been communicated properly by me. So maybe they thought that this is an event in which they can be flaky or flighty, or if I feel like it, I'll show up. If not, it doesn't matter. So I also take responsibility. I learned with experience to take responsibility that if something is not, that I shouldn't take it as a, what's our word, Amina? Take it for granted or be obvious. What is obvious to me is not necessarily obvious to somebody else. So they might, I might invite you and you think, oh, it's a maybe or situation. And I'm like Meher preparing things and doing that, but maybe to them it's an optional thing rather than an obligatory thing.
One thing I'd like to explain is, and if I go into this, I have Isra's note here, but if I can go on a little bit, this might be supportive to Maher. Would that be okay?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay. So the next piece in this is exploring observations and evaluations. So when you evaluate something, this is better than that. That's an evaluation. We're judging. So I'll use the word evaluation or judgment. And poor Mr. Cornfield, who's not mentioned here, he says in one of his books, the unhealthy patterns of our personality can be recognized and transformed into a healthy expression of our natural temperament. And then my thought after that is this allows us to return to the Creator's original intention. Okay. And I quoted Rachel Naomi Remen, I think the first night, but I don't think I had the full quote then. Anyway, she says, the places in which we are seen and heard are holy places. They remind us of our intrinsic goodness and worth. They give us strength to go on. Eventually, they may help us to transform our pain into wisdom. So just like I was met by my friend all those years ago, she saw and she heard me. And instead of trying to fix me or guessing what might be wrong or having a story, she was just able to reflect back what she thought I might be feeling and needing. And it touched me to the core. So I want to look at this idea of observation. That's our first step. When we observe something, it's noticing without judgment. I often use that image. I say, notice without judgment what you're feeling. But here, just notice without judging. Pure awareness. And observation is what I see or hear. And there is no backstory attached to an observation. For example, so I use this example. When I came home from work, I saw that the living room had dirty dishes on the carpet, unfolded wash on the sofa, and books and toys on the floor. There's no backstory there, and we'll explore what a backstory is. It's pure fact. It's an observation. An evaluation includes a judgment about facts. So here's an evaluation.
Amina, if we can just pause for a moment. We have a question, Naima, but before we jump into the question, I just wanted to highlight that this first step, it seems like this observing is the first step.
Yes.
Okay, so then this reminds me of what Dr. Yamina shared in the past in our sessions about and this is, I remember when I do it sometimes now because of how much it's been drilled into my head or heart, is we own the feeling. Like the minute that you own what's happening and you own your feeling, there is a loss of this pure awareness. So it reminds me again of that little black bird, when you can just notice the situation that just triggered you, or, you know, stimulated you, like you would say. And then also not only observe the situation that just happened, but also observe that feeling that just landed on you, like you would say, as a little black bird, pure awareness. And the Quranic concept that Dr. Amina has shared in the past that you can find on YouTube was this concept of selling it back to God or not owning it. Is the first step is just recognizing that something arrived, something happened, and then a feeling arrived. And this is worth a million repetitions, because the minute that we own the feeling and we say, I am, so now you are the feeling, is the point of no return. Like, you cannot perceive the situation in a compassionate way or a meaningful way, let's say, because there's an ownership, and then that leads to a reaction. So I just wanted to make that connection with what we've talked about in the past. And Naima has a question. Naima.
So it's more of a reflection and question, and it connects almost entirely to what you just shared, Sarah. So one of the things that I was thinking about as you were sharing is that isn't our feelings really about how we are experiencing our own inner energy? And I feel like expressing your need doesn't mean that what you long for or what you really deeply desire will be matched. And I feel like the awareness of the needs is not about the experience. It's about empathy, which I feel separates what you're experiencing and what you're feeling. And then it makes me ask the question, where do those feelings or thoughts live? And do the feelings live in our heart? Because it's an immaterial desire that cannot be filled by a person. And then I go into like thinking about, okay, those experiences that we're sharing live in our mind. And I feel like often we try to place the experiences in our hearts when that's not at all where it belongs. So it's like a question, and like connections that I'm making. I don't know. That's just what
I
I'm
use
thinking
the
about.
heart. Thank you. I use the heart as an example for feeling, but we can have feelings anywhere in our body. I have a friend who was able to realize that she's, let's say, working on herself, wanting new tools in her life to do things differently. And there's someone, an acquaintance of hers, who sometimes says very unkind things. And what she came to the realization of was that she needed space from this person, because the person wasn't interested in feelings or needs or connecting in a different way. And she's learning this process. And she just realized she needed space. And once she had that realization, she said, her digestive system started to clear up. She'd had pain in her shoulder and somewhere else in the body, and those symptoms went away. When we don't take care of the things that we're holding on, they live in the body, and they sometimes manifest as, and the other one was headache for her, migraines. So next time I speak with her, I'll ask her, how are you doing? So they don't all have to sit in the heart. They have an effect on the body. And in Asian medicine, Chinese medicine, they'll talk about different organs representing different feelings. So, yeah, but that's a different.
Dr. Amina and Sister Amina, thank you so much for this. I joined in a little bit late. I'm sorry, but I really think that personally, all these three workshops, one I think I ended up missing, but the notes make me think again and again, go back and again, think about my feeling, my personal reflection on my situation right now between chemo and grieving and cumulative loss. when loss is recent or distant. I think what the other sister was talking when I joined in about holding on to when somebody stands us up. And the ultimate example, if I were to think of it in my case, I can't even ask God to bring back my husband. I can't ask my husband to come back to me, right? So I feel stood up. I feel bluffed. I feel abandoned in that sense. But I cannot say that because as a Muslim woman struggling to perfect my faith, I'm going to say, like Dr. Yamina also says, and in your teachings here in these series, from a more neuro biofeedback, I will say, point of view, that how trauma, losing someone is a trauma. Getting a cancer diagnosis is a trauma for me at age 42. Not being a mother, wanting to be a mother, having gone through IVF and not even having my husband spared is a trauma. And then losing my pets 3 days ago is a trauma. Suddenly 2 parakeets died. I don't know what happened to them. And I'm going through all these swings of cancer chemo side effects every 2 weeks. Anyway, there is only so much one can hold. So what Dr. Yamina said in one of her lectures was that, you know, you think that you are the host of, you are the guest of Allah on earth, and we have to be thinking of it in that sense that whatever the host is, whatever our host is giving us, we receive it. I today thought, and I said, I need to flip it for myself. And I'm going to say, I'm the host, and whatever guest Allah is sending me, pain, suffering, sorrow, I need to welcome it, you know. And then both ways this has been discussed. And in your today's lecture, I find that the ventral dorsal topic that we discussed, we also look at the proxim or distal, that how the proximity and the intensity of a relationship is from psychotherapeutic point of view. When I teach and have been teaching assertive communication skills to my clients who had long-standing traumas with domestic abuse issues going on, or men and women were unable to talk up and ask their families to understand their reasonable desires, that what profession I want to go in and who I want to marry. They were not doing drugs and drinking, but the parents were very controlling and the family was very judgmental, to a point where the daughter and the son said, we don't want to marry, or we don't want to study at all, and we are going to just go and do something totally different, because now you have irritated us so much that we have no outlet. The point is, from a Quranic perspective, this is my reflection. Now I'm realizing anytime I've been angry, I should have learned Quran with translation earlier, where Allah Ta'ala says that I appreciate people who are kazimin al-ghaib. They're going to chew their anger. And we don't do that in our everyday dealings, because people mistreat us and then we get upset. On the other hand, Allah also didn't say that, you know, become a doormat. Nowhere in Quran it is written, like it is said about Christianity, that Jesus will offer the other cheek to be, you know, slapped on. That's humility of a person, yes. But I think our faith also teaches us to assertively say, no, I don't think that this is right. And if the other person is really mistreating us, that we need to, in the moment, return back, like somebody else said, use that moment right then and there to very carefully but firmly, politely but firmly hold your ground and say, I don't think that this is the right way to talk to me, or don't do it again. What would you say about that? Because we still hold on to trauma.
So there's a lot of pieces here, and I appreciate you sharing, and I really paused inside of myself just to create some space in my being and heart for all that you're going through. It's a big passage.
Thank you.
And I just want to hold space for that.
I appreciate this. Sorry, I just went on and on.
Well, and welcome. We have this is a circle, so we have a big container. There's a big container here.
Yeah.
So digress a little bit from this and just say that anytime, and this I'll have in my notes, anytime a person doesn't feel safe or needs a conversation to end, you don't need to give that person empathy, because if you don't have the energy to do that, it's hard to do that. It's not honest. And you can simply say, I'm overwhelmed, and this is a lot for me right now.
Mhm.
I'm willing to listen to you later when there's no yelling, or I'm willing to listen later when we've both calmed down, or I'm overwhelmed and I need space and I'm just going to leave right now and let's connect later. Never ask for permission. Go with what your body's saying. If you need to get out of there, if you need to create space for yourself, that's honest. And that's a way to do it without being defensive or yelling, you know, or taking on a energy that you're not capable of taking on. Sometimes, you know, if I have someone talking politics to me, I may have to say, this is overwhelming. I need a big pause right now. Okay. But I want to hear about it later, but not right now. This is overwhelming. So we get we get tested, and it really is honoring what your body is saying. And if it says I need space, then honor this. You don't want to take in that energy. You're a container and holding on a great, there's a great deal happening in your life. Yeah. And so I'm going to talk a little bit. Let me do this piece, and then can we go a little past time? Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Because I think as we go into this is about stripping away stories. No backstory. So I'm hearing some just because my ear is trained to hear it. And I certainly put in backstories sometimes when I talk, but I notice I do it because I'm bolstering my case. I'm walking with all of you. I just happen to be sitting in this chair that lets me talk a lot. I'm the same as all of you. I'm as human as all of us here. So, but you want to strip away the backstory, because backstory comes from imagination. So there are certain words, and that's actually coming up in this. I thought it was coming up in tonight's lesson, but we've just been doing so much wonderful sharing. And it really gets down to just the facts. What somebody said, what they did, or what they didn't say, and what they didn't do. Just the facts, stripping it away. And when we have an evaluation, I was going there, includes a judgment about facts. So an example of a judgment or evaluation would be, when I came home from work and saw that you left a mess in the living room, I worked hard to clean this house. You have no respect for me. Okay, is it true, whoever they are, is it true they have no respect? No, we don't know that. That's a backstory. That's a backstory. And even to say it's a mess in the living room, that's something of a backstory. It's not in order, but a mess. Sometimes there's a connotation that somebody created something bad. I worked hard to clean the house. Okay, that's a fact. That's going to tie right into the feeling. I worked hard to clean a house and I'm feeling tired and cranky and have a need for order. But the backstory is you have no respect for me. And there's certain words, I don't know if we'll get to them tonight, that are not needs and not feelings. Okay, they're disguised somewhat. So a judgment like the one in the above statement creates disconnection with others and ourselves. Someone said to me, you have no respect for anything I do. The person listening to that, there's a guilt in that, right? Words are somewhat blaming, shaming. There's no connection, and that's what we want. We want connection. So when we're making an observation, it's just the facts. Anytime I start to put in a backstory, I'm trying to make it's power over rather than power with. Do you see that? I want to be right. I'm right. I know I'm right. So I've got my backstory bolstering me up. Okay. Sometimes, and this is just a little, let me see where to go. Okay. Judgments also point to a need. So sometimes a person might say, he's weird. Okay, that's a judgment, but that person might be expressing a need for safety. That guy's weird. So it's not it's a judgment for sure. It's not a clear observation. When he said this or he did that, I felt it didn't feel right to me. I felt uncomfortable, and I really have a need for safety. That's how we would express it in compassionate communication. When we say to ourselves, so, I'm on this one, I'm stupid, I can't do anything right. That little nagging thought, can't do it right, can't get it right. That might express a need for self-acceptance, support, and patience. So the key is to tap into, it's not that I'm stupid, it's just that maybe I'm feeling a need for a hug. Now, I don't know if that's that's not really a feeling. I have a need for maybe some connection or some support, some kindness in that moment. And if it's me talking to me, I can meet myself with kindness. Say, whoa, you're doing a lot here. Some support, some patience. That befriending ourselves with kindness. So, this is probably a good place for us to jiggle a little bit and wiggle. We're talking about a lot of stuff. So rubbing our arms and, can stand up and shake our hands out, make faces. Want to make a face at me, Maha? Okay. You know how kids do it. It's actually in this wonderful book that with rocking exercises and jiggling. Kids retch, little kids go, stick their finger down their throat, right? We can do all those things. There's such honesty and almost a purity in even that, you feeling better, people feeling a little better if we shake it out. Now, shall I keep going or do we need to close right now?
No, please go on.
Okay, so now this could be a breakout room exercise, but we could just do it as a group. So with the time, what do you feel you would like to do? I can read it and you can answer as a group, okay? So we have to identify which statement is an observation and which statement is a judgment. If the sentence is a judgment, can we change it into an observation? And I'm going to give you one or two examples, okay? So a judgment would be, that little girl is so nice. It's kind of a judgment. An observation might be, when I see that little girl, she always smiles and asks me how I am. That really touches in, there's a whole feeling to that. Do you see the difference? That little girl is always smiling and laughing whenever I walk around her. And then I might say she's a sweetheart. I might qualify it. But saying she's nice or sweetheart doesn't give a lot of information. Okay. So my first sentence is, she's not a good dancer. Is that an observation or a judgment? Anybody jump in.
Judgment.
Judgment.
Yeah. Anyone else? No wrong answers here. So
I think it could go both ways if you're evaluating someone, for instance, if you're a teacher and
it's actually, I want to say it's a better way to word that, because maybe she's not having a good dance day because her foot hurt, and otherwise she might be a brilliant dancer. Or you could say, every time I dance with her, she steps on my toes. She's not a good dancer becomes an evaluation, a judgment. Because we don't know the backstory, but I could say every time I dance, we'll make it a him. Every time I dance with him, he steps on my toes. Okay? Do you see the difference in there? There's just a different feeling when we, it's sort of saying why or our observation without judgment. Every time I dance with him, he steps on my toes. Okay. So, and there's a backstory. If we say she's not a good dancer, she may not be dancing well, but we don't know why. We don't know what's happening. So let's go to Yusuf always complains. Is that a judgment or an evaluation? Yusuf always complains.
Observation.
I think judgment.
Evaluation.
I think the word always puts in the judgment. If we remove that word, I think there would be more of an observation.
Yes. So always is a big piece to that. He probably doesn't always complain. I don't know. He might, but you might say every time Yusuf goes to work, he complains that he's not happy there. It's like wanting to qualify it instead of making a blanket statement that she's not a good dancer or he always complains. And always is a big key to this. I have to smile with the next one. My daughter would be smiling as she read it. My mother is a bad cook. Is that a judgment or an observation?
My son says that all the time.
Judgment.
Yes, the good news is it's a judgment. So my daughter once said to me, Mom, if there were a group of mothers lined up with their backs to me cooking, I'd know which one was you by the smell of burnt food, stuck for all. She was right. I said, well, when you're a mother, you'll know you multitask and you burn things. So, but anyway, so my mother is a bad cook. That doesn't, every time my mother cooked, well, when my mother cooks, she often burns food. That's an observation. But to say she's a bad cook, come on, there's some good meals there, I'm sure. Maybe. Okay, I'm going to skip to another one. This is, we hear it in the news. Yeah, Latif, that country is evil.
Judgment.
Is that a judgment or an evaluation? What do you think? It's a judgment. We can say, I disagree with that country's policy about this. Or generally speaking, I'm not comfortable with the policies that come out of that country or that organization or that political party. But is that country evil? That labels all the people in that country. Yikes. Yikes. It's stuck for law. Yikes. Yeah. Miriam came to work early every day last week.
Observation.
Observation. No backstory there. It's what happened. Joe dropped a hammer while he was working. Observation. She's Majnuna. She's crazy.
Judgment.
Yeah. Now you might say she's a wild child. Every time I see her, she's going to some new place, or she drives that car fast, or something more qualifying. But to say she's crazy is again a blanket statement. My mother made a delicious apple pie last night.
Observation.
Observation. So you're getting a feel for this a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
How,
Yeah.
Amina, if I may ask, how's that an observation? Because when you're saying delicious, that's a judgment. It may be delicious to you, but not to me.
Yeah, I know. This is tricky stuff, but it was delicious. Then we could qualify it. But I think for that one to say a delicious pie, it's me saying that she made a delicious pie. But if I said my mother always makes delicious pies, it might be true. But yeah, there's some subtleties here. You're right. Well, I'm going to give you points on that one. Thank you. And I'll take a minus point for me. So if we're doing that, so yeah.
Sister Amina,
Amina, given that,
go ahead.
go ahead, please.
No, go ahead. It's okay.
No, you go.
Thank you. Very quickly, I think in the context of, again, our cognition and perception, I wanted to come to, because these days I'm reflecting on those two a lot, because I'm trying to pay attention to my reactions to things as through the good knowledge that I'm gaining here, and also just as I percolate everything and let it sink in my head between my other groups that I've joined and the books that I'm reading, and of course Quran, and then my interactions with others and how others are responding to me now that somebody who used to be, because I've seen a transformation in my family's responses to me because of what has happened over the course of the last year or so with me, and how I used to be the tough one, and now they are all trying to be the really understanding one, and I am learning because of my own weakness, physical weakness, and also my spiritual and mental exhaustion with grief and illness, that my reactions are kind of numbing out. My language is not as bitter, and I realize that it is actually in and of itself making me have just one hope, that at least I'm not gaining the sins of the tongue. And it is also actually helping me recognize that when I let go of something as simple as why my brother laid the banana upside down and not the vertical stand hung up on that, I would say it's okay, it's fine. But when I used to be very picky about it, when my husband was alive, may God bless his soul in the highest of Jannahs, always, uh, we would have a little witty argument with each other that, no, really, it's important to like have an actual argument, but like obviously a friendly one, witty one. And now I'm realizing these things don't matter. Why? Because futile fights and mundane reasons because of which I'm wasting my energy, I just can't afford it right now. So I'm saying that from perceptual and cognitive perspective, there has to be a linguistic shift as well in order for us to do what you are asking, that it works to calm us down, and it also makes sure that for future interactions our relationships have some expectations that are fair and that are not burdening to one party. Am I right?
Yes, that's a great deal to share. I'm just letting myself take that in. But just to have clear observations without the backstories, to notice without judging. I can share a story if you like, and it's just a kind of deep story. When I was teaching many years ago, I had a student that was always coming in 15, 20 minutes late, sometimes a half hour. And I found myself getting frustrated because I would always back up what I was teaching and try to fill her in so she'd get caught up so we could continue as a group. And one day I got my little nuffs got its nose bent out of joint, right? And break time was coming and she'd come in late. And I thought, and I was never really an unkind teacher, though I didn't always know how to express myself well, but I thought, I'm going to go and tell her that it's holding up the class when she comes in late and it's kind of a disruption, blah, 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 whatever I was thinking. And as I was walking over to her, something, subhanAllah, something shifted in me. And I realized without thinking about it that I needed to take a different tact. And I went up to her, and I don't even know if I had studied this then, but I said, I noticed you were late. Is everything okay? And she said, I just came from my mother's funeral. what was in my head prior to that was a backstory that she was rude, that she was coming in late and disrupting the class, that she wasn't being considerate. I didn't know how to put my feelings and needs. And then, I'm never going to forget that. I always, when I tell that, I have to hold that moment in my heart because it was a beautiful lesson from God through her. And then I also realized she'd been coming in late for a while and I had never connected with her and said, "Is everything okay?" earlier. Maybe she'd been helping her mom or maybe something different. But I just remembered that that's a backstory. We don't always know what's happening in someone's life. And sometimes I had plenty of students that would just wander in by by whatever country or time zone their watch was running by that were late for class. But it's how we can connect with somebody as opposed to coming in and doing power over. Really listening to, instead of my judgments about her, what was I feeling? And it even came down to connecting with her and not putting my feelings there. And that was God's grace. That wasn't me that asked that good question of her. That was God's grace.
So, Amina, wouldn't that be like closing the circle with Meher? Wouldn't that be a good way, like when something happens, to just say the observation? Like even before stating my needs, I noticed that you never showed up. Is everything okay? And then from there, like, take, that would be like the beginning of, like, to see what happens. So maybe that will be closing the circle there.
Yeah, I was feeling very frustrated and upset. But then I realized that maybe, something had happened. Is everything okay with you? Even though she already expressed she had to go to the grocery store, is everything okay? Always good to have that pause that we're doing. Yeah, absolutely. And this is about stripping away the story. We're never abandoned, used, betrayed. And it feels like that. I understand those words and those, but we can translate. We'll do that next week. Those are judgments disguised as feelings. So we'll have a list we'll go through next week, inshallah. That talk. But I'm thinking this, I'm happy to teach on, we can rock on. But if it's time to close, let me at least read. I have some practice if you want, some heart work, not homework, but some practice to add to. So here's my request. Marshall Rosenberg said that when someone would say to him, "That was a great workshop," he would say, "Thank you, but that doesn't tell me anything. Can you tell me 3 things that work for you?" So I'm going to ask you, and it's late. I probably won't say, please stay and do this in chat. But what I was going to ask, and would you be willing? I'm making a request. Would you be willing to tell me if there was something you enjoyed about the workshop in chat and something that didn't work for you? And that really gives me an idea of how I might be able to meet your needs. So I don't care whether it's anonymous. I don't need to see names, but you're welcome to do that, or we could do that another time, because I'm just respecting, maybe you have a need to rest and go and sleep. But I'd appreciate that at some point, because that supports me in how I can meet your needs better and know, oh, that was great. That worked for you. We'll keep doing it. So what we've been doing, here's our practice for the coming week, inshallah. So when pausing, we've been learning how to just stop and pause and feel our feet on the earth and our breath and softening shoulders. How about if you are able to take time to pause, might be just getting out of bed or out of the car. Pause and then notice, what am I feeling? See if you can touch into your body. It's a felt sense, a sensation in the body rather than the mind. Noticing without judging. And you may want to layer it by asking, what's my need? So I noticed this morning when I got out, maybe it was yesterday, I feel achy. My need is to stretch. I spend lots of hours in front of this computer. So what's my need? So we can do that, or just pause and notice what we're feeling. You can keep it simple. You may want to also notice times when it feels like you're judging or observing, right? Right? Or something someone may say, you might hear it on TV even. Oh, politicians are great. If you can listen to it, oh no, not another newscast, right? But notice when people, and that's a judgment, right? Not meeting my need for compassionate communication, right? So, but you can notice if you hear observations or judgments or have a thought, maybe note it down. And the other thing you can do, so this is a little slightly different shift. If you find yourself in the dorsal nervous system, right? Helpless, hopeless, isolated. Oh, no gas left in the tank. Could you write down? It's good to write it down because it helps to take it out of the head. Okay. I feel because I need. When I'm in dorsal, I feel because I need. I'm feeling sad. I'm feeling alone because I need. Or when I'm in my sympathetic nervous system, I feel confused and chaotic because I need a pause and grounding and clarity and other things depending on the situation. So those are just some thoughts that you might want to see what works for you well. What works for you? Right. So
Thank you, Amina. That was so useful. I love the heart work / homework. The heart work to be done at home.
Yeah.
Home in our bodies and home in our house where the body also lives. I think that the homework really is so important because otherwise it just becomes information and really we don't focus on that transformative piece. So that's so important. I noticed that Sana had a hand up. Did you want to share something, Sana?
Assalamu alaikum. Yes, I really wanted to give a feedback that today's discussion about judging and observing really hit home with me because of late my two kids, my son is 9 and my daughter is 7. They've been fighting a lot with each other, maybe guarding their own spaces. And I would give them support, but then I felt I would get angrier than them because every time I'd see them fight, I didn't realize that I had a backstory running and one story would add to the other and to the other. So I just realized while listening to Sister Amina that maybe if I disconnect my observation with the whole pile of backstories that I have, I can better understand what is the need of each child. And maybe I can sit with them and help them understand that we have feelings and we have needs. And maybe I cannot ask them to look at the feeling or the need of the other person, but maybe start with their own selves, what I'm feeling, and maybe if they start being a bit mindful, they can also start being mindful of the other person's state. So I just felt really happy because I've been very upset about their bickering and fighting. And so I think I have a little breakthrough through this session today, how to go about with the situations I face daily because of all the fights with my children. So I just wanted to appreciate and thank you.
Thank you so much. And the other piece is go slowly. If you just stay with observation or just stay with feeling, really, really go slowly. That we go as fast as trust allows, and we get there quicker when we go slower. So
yes, Because I realized when you try to add a backstory, it just drains us more, because we have to justify things, whereas we can't really justify what the other person is thinking or doing or where they're coming from. So I think I'm going to learn how to stay within my own space and not try to judge and understand or predict what the other person is saying or doing, and let them be safe in their space as well. So that's my biggest take home from today's session. Alhamdulillah.
Thank you. And that's a big one, alhamdulillah, is just being able to connect with our bodies, our feelings and needs. And then later, inshallah, maybe we can learn how to connect with someone else, but that not right in the beginning. Just so anyway, thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. So happy to be here.
There was just a request to review what the heart work homework is. So I couldn't write it down in time, but I'll just repeat it, inshallah, for everyone. Please do take note with your pen and paper that hopefully you took out when we did our exercise. So the first one is to schedule in time, or try to take note of time to pause and feel self in your body. Like when you get out of bed, or I put in the kitchen because that's where most of my time is. Feeling how your feet feel in the floor. And then asking yourself, what am I feeling? Just notice whatever you feel without judging. And then you can layer that with what's my need. So maybe my feet hurt. I always ignore any bodily needs, but this is a beautiful reminder to, I'm going to have to set alarms, because with other, like Dr. Yamina says, without that, I really have not done it. This is session 4. So if you haven't done it yet without an alarm, then join me in setting an alarm. Because you'll most likely at least do it once a day if you have an alarm, inshallah. The second one is notice when you're observing or judging, and Sister Sana just said it so beautifully, throughout the day, and just start to once you intend to notice, I think we'll all become much more aware of how much judgment we are actually passing, and we'll be able to pick up next week, inshallah, with how to continue from there. But at least for now, just notice when you're adding judgments into what you're observing throughout the day. And finally, number 3 is, if you find yourself in that heavy despair, that heavy helplessness, that heavy isolated state, try to remember, I feel because I need.
When I'm in dorsal, or when I'm in this state, I feel because I need. And if you find yourself in the,
and if I find myself in sympathetic.
Yeah. Go ahead. Same.
And I really love that you added that part, because if I find myself overworked or really like chaotic energy or anxious and that fight or flight, then I feel because I need. And it's all to bring us back to what we've been talking about today, this regulated, balanced state where we can only come back to if we start to notice what feelings are coming in our bodies. Thank you all for joining us. Does anyone have any final?
I want to say something little. Be playful. This stuff can get really heavy and serious if we let it, if we're noticing everything all the time. It really gets stuck in the head. So I think it's do what you can, play with it. Do what you can do with it. But we need to have a sense of humor. Maybe bring a joke next week if you don't do any exercises. But to be playful and kind to ourselves with this.
Very quickly, Sister Amina, I never caught, I think in the first session, that you're a therapist, or you're doing the EFT work or trauma work with groups, or how did this?
I'm not a licensed talk therapist. I'm just basically a nice lady from New Jersey who needed lots of healing and fell into this work and other things over the last 30 years.
Wow.
And I've always
You-
had that desire to share what I love. And somehow Zoom has made this be much more accessible, and teaching classes, classes in justice or trauma or insight meditation. I'm starting to do that and seeing people, but I'm not covered by insurance. So I like to just think of myself as, technical language might be an educator, but better than that, just sharing some neat stuff.
Yeah. And you do it superbly. No, I appreciate this a lot. I think
But
it's
Amina,
distinct.
Sister Amina said that she was trained to practice this specific trauma therapy. You might
No,
want
of
to add
course.
that.
Thank you. Yeah, I have certification in it and in some prenatal trauma work and a lot of other interesting things. But so I can work with people, and it's possible to do it on Zoom. And I will have that resource list. Like I said, I was just waiting for one person to see if I could use them as a reference person. And I have lots of wonderful resources for everybody.
Thank you so much for sharing them. Really appreciate this.
Thank you, everybody, for your immeasurable kindness and your
Sister
light.
Amina, may I ask one final question?
Sure.
So we talked about needs. So if you are unclear of your needs, how does one go about identifying those?
To me, the way is that your feeling will always take you to a need. And really, if we were doing Zoom therapy, we would just sit with that feeling in the body. We would really sit and feel it and go very slow. So this is not a technique to apply, all the pieces will fall together. This is about being in the body and identifying that feeling and allowing yourself to say, it's okay for me to have feelings. Sometimes I've been afraid to share my feelings. Sometimes it's, I have shame. I've said I was a nice person. Nice people have anger. I think it's a blanket statement, I know, but that's my experience. So that connect with that feeling. And what we can create, we can talk about this, we can create empathy buddies, and I'll talk about what that is. But really just sitting with that feeling. And when you get it, you'll feel it. And then that feeling will lead you to a need. And having the list so allows you to lightly look over the needs, see what jumps out at you, what connects to that feeling, and that it's okay to have a need.
Okay, fantastic. I've got some homework to do then. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your sharing tonight.
Jazakallah khair, Amina. Thank you so much. May Allah reward you. This has been a wonderful 4-session series, and today we really went inwards with the practice, and that I hope everyone does the homework. So inshallah, we will see you all next Friday. And for those that have committed to the healing prescription, we will be doing, as Isra reminded us, a bi-weekly check-in tomorrow, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Jazakumullah khair, everyone, for joining us. Maha, did you want to say something?
Thank you, Sister Amina. Thank you, Dr. Sarah. And happy birthday, Isra.
Happy birthday, Lala.
Happy birthday, Isra.
Which is our way to say